And I'm delighted to welcome Javier Piedra, who is the Deputy Assistant Administrator for the Bureau for Asia, where he provides oversight and management for South and Central Asia and technical service portfolios. He brings 35 years of private and public sector experience to USAID. He spent several years in Asia working on investment banking, and he has also spent time in Central Asia in the Biodiversity Project, and 20 years combined experience of living in Central Asia and Latin America. So we are very grateful that you took the time from all of your commitments to come here. Please join me in welcoming Javier Piedra.
Yeah, is this working? Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Angela. And I will stand up and make a few remarks in connection with all that has taken place this morning. Yeah, I have spent the last 16 years in Central Asia, where I worked with KPMG doing corporate finance M&A work. I'm not a government person, and so my love is the private sector, and I know a bit about the oil, gas, and mining sector, although I won't speak about that. And then I will focus really on the work that USAID does, and as a preliminary comment, I'd like to just say that we do humanitarian and developmental work, and very often folks think that we are restricted to humanitarian work. We're also heavily involved in the area of development, and that is increasingly a very important component of the work that we do in around the world. So the U.S. Agency for International Development has partnered with all 5 countries of Central Asia since the independence from the Soviet Union more than 25 years ago. We have helped to restructure and modernize their health and education systems, their economies and governance structures to unlock trade and investment and spur growth. We support over the years from the private sector, from companies like Chevron, we have achieved notable gains in the region. And you can see this in any number of different areas that we're working on with the private sector. For example, in Kazakhstan, USAID helped develop and implement the laws, regulations, and infrastructure necessary to establish capital markets. USAID supported the formation of an independent Securities and Exchange Commission, assisted in opening the country's first private stock exchange, and promoted oversight of the nascent securities market. Today, Kazakhstan is a middle-income country, and this is no accident. They have worked very closely with us and with many other players to enter into that middle-income country. In the Kyrgyz Republic, USAID helped put the legal and regulatory framework in place to establish microcredit and wholesale lending institutions. Such institutions are important because they enable business people and farmers to start and expand their businesses, contribute to job creation and economic growth. We have established a legal market for fertilizer and seed imports and developed associations that work to improve the business climate. USAID supported the country's transition to international accounting standards, a process that continues, and I worked on some of that when I was in Almaty all those years, and we would travel back and forth between Astana and Almaty down to the Kyrgyz Republic, to Tashkent and other places to help in putting together those systems. In Uzbekistan, during the early years of partnership, USAID helped the government reform the banking system, modify the foreign exchange policy, and restructure fiscal analysis and tax policy. USAID helped create credit unions and microfinance organizations that expanded access to finance for SMEs. And I think the changes, some of the changes that you see taking place in Uzbekistan right now, the receptivity and the increased engagement can be traced to a large extent to to the work that we've been doing in country, because they're very receptive to working with us. And I think it's been a very positive engagement over the last 20 to 25 years. Building on these remarkable gains today, aid takes a dual-pronged approach to bolstering Central Asian economies. We focus on diversification to spur growth, while at the same time connecting the economies of Central Asia to each other and their neighbors to boost trade. And I think there's one point here is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. You've heard that before. And I just repeat that we work at a regional level and at a bilateral level. Our economic diversification, we are encouraging economic policy reforms to promote trade, attract investment, and create jobs. In the Kyrgyz Republic, aid has supported the government in carrying out legal reforms that have helped the country dramatically and drastically improve its World Bank doing business ranking. And it just came out, and I would encourage everyone to look at it. It's quite amazing. And in some categories, they're right up at the top, which this is not accidental. We have been working on this for many, many years. It now ranks overall among the top 7 of 47 lower middle income countries. We also helped connect Central Asian economies to the global market through macroeconomic reform assistance to ensure compliance with worldwide rules-based transparent frameworks. USAID helped Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, and the Kyrgyz Republic exceed WTO and promises expertise and training to Turkmenistan on accession. We continue to engage in all of these countries. Harnessing the power of private sector. USAID, we believe that private enterprise is one of the most powerful forces for lifting lives, strengthening communities, and accelerating partner country progression towards self-reliance. What's behind this, of course, is that we believe that our model of economic growth and development is superior to most others out there. And so this is something that we will continue to work with the private sector. Accordingly, in connecting Central Asian economies with each other and beyond, we are leveraging the power of private enterprise. In the Kyrgyz Republic, USAID partnered with local businesses and leveraged private investment by over 7-to-1 to establish the country's only feed mill, largest dairy, food processing plants, and lots of other things. I'm not going to go through the list. USAID assisted local producers in complying with regional and export market standards, resulting in export contracts equal to 4% of the entire country's agricultural exports. So we've got all kinds of folks working at the grassroots level, and I mean at the rules and regs. How do we level the playing field? How do we engage the governments and the ministries in order to improve all of the things that need to happen in order to attract investment, in order to facilitate trade, and all of these very important things. And very often people don't hear about this and what we're doing. And I've seen it very closely. In fact, I was involved personally. I spent 5 years on the establishment of the credit bureau in Kazakhstan, which is a major task. But that was designed to increase access to credit at the retail level, basically, at mortgages, car loans, to identify the people who are coming into the bank, et cetera. And this was a very fruitful, I think, exercise certainly for Kazakhstan. At the regional level, we've been holding annual trade forums to conduct Central Asian companies with new trade partners in and outside the region. And this last October, we sponsored the Central Asia Trade Forum, which was in October. That's the 8th that we've sponsored, and the numbers are looking really good in terms of the companies that came to the forum, and then the number of transactions that were completed. We have estimates of that, and we have $54 million in letters of intent, which is a new record for the Central Asia Trade Forum. We think this is very positive. We're also working at a very high level as well, and I can go into some of those things very briefly. I will. Our efforts to build greater connectivity are advanced through the C5+1. I think you all know exactly what that means. I'm not going to go through the C5+1. I wasn't here this morning, but I'm sure that needs not to be repeated. In Kazakhstan, U.S. assistance, the country held its first ever competitive auction for solar power generation in June 2018. The word I want to focus on here is competitive. No, as far as we know, there never any hanky-pank here. I mean, it's truly competitive, which is a milestone in the development of attracting resources into the country. The transparent market-based approach resulted in prices 25% cheaper while maintaining quality than those previously seen in the country. At the same time, we know the United States can't do it alone. We are leveraging and working with the European Union, the multilateral the international financial institutions. In fact, when I first went to Central Asia, I went with the IFC, and we were looking at the banking sector and doing liquidity analysis on the banks themselves. We always work very closely with the international financial institutions. The strategic why our economic engagement is vital to the U.S. national interest. I have a few, and I'll skip over some of this, but a secure, stable, prosperous Central Asia is key to U.S. national interests. For one, it's important to stabilizing neighboring Afghanistan through increased trade and energy linkages and closer people-to-people ties. This supports implementation of the United States' South Asia strategy, which is pivotal, the whole Afghanistan, Central Asia, and then beyond south, and the east-west connectivity as well. Bolstering the economies of Central Asia is strategically important for the U.S. It lessens their vulnerability to falling prey to predatory lending tactics pushed by malign authoritarian actors. As one of the least economically integrated regions of the world, Central Asia struggles to create a dynamic economic environment for its people, more than half of whom are under the age of 30. With limited economic opportunity at home, workers migrate in search of employment. And we know this migration is taking place mainly north, but it's also to Turkey and other countries. It is in the United States' national security interest to pay attention to Central Asia labor migration patterns, and this is what I was referring to. I'll skip over some of that, but we know it's taking place, especially in connection with the Tajiks, the Kyrgyz, and the Uzbeks going north in search of opportunity and whatnot. And then fostering energy connectivity and trade. I'll mention two projects that we are working on and very instrumental in. USAID is connecting the power grids of Central Asia to each other and their neighbors in South Asia to boost trade and increase stability. Energy connectivity is vital. A World Bank study concluded that the loss of the Central Asian economy to low energy trade is more than $5 billion over the period of 2010 to 2014. There are enormous energy needs and challenges, mainly challenges in the export of challenges. And it was mentioned coal is extraordinarily important, obviously up in the Karaganda area and elsewhere. There's traditionally large mining operations in coal. So let me just quickly mention, to address this, the United States since 2011 has strongly supported the development of CASA 1000. And very few people know that we finance the Secretariat on an annual basis over the last several years. We haven't raised our head and talked about it much, but I believe that working with the World Bank and others, we have been instrumental in bringing all the parties together. It's a very complex, well, I don't want to say transaction, but it's a very complex project that spans 4 countries, 4 very different countries. And so this is something that we've been working on with the Islamic Development Bank, the countries themselves, the EBRD, the European Investment Bank, and DFID, and others. And so this is something we've really been central to this whole project, and we don't talk about it much, but I am now. This project builds on years of U.S. technical assistance, helping these countries to develop and implement modern energy sector management, moving the excesses down south into Afghanistan, through Afghanistan into Pakistan. And then the other project I'd briefly like to mention in terms of energy is CERES, which is a Central Asia regional electricity market. This is something that we've just allocated a considerable amount of resources to pull this project together. And this is in partnership with the 5 countries and the State Department and other donors. And it is a significant project. This effort will build a long-standing relationship in the Central Asian power sector, including with the multilaterals, to establish an independent system operator and the standards and grid codes needed for a modern regional power system, which to some extent existed under the Soviets. You had the collapse in the 1990s, as we all know. And then you've had this slow reintegration in the opening and the greater communication since the change in vector, if you will, in Uzbekistan. CERES will build regional institutions that ensure fair transactions, include dispute resolution processes, and promote fair pricing, all of which supports Central Asia. So in conclusion, let me just say, this is a time, I think, of promise. I'm not going to talk about the geopolitical importance of the region. That's more for State Department, and I'm sure you've been talking about that all morning in terms of the region's, the centrality and the importance of Central Asia, given its northern, eastern, southern, and western countries in the region. So I'm not going to talk about that, but the success of USAID's efforts over the years, coupled with the political changes, have opened new opportunities to increase regional self-sufficiency, decrease dependence on authoritarian models of economic and political development, and increase domestic energy diversification and connectivity. USAID stands ready to deepen our economic and energy engagement with the Central Asian nations to ensure the development decisions that are made today help them realize their long-term success by moving them forward on their journeys to self-reliance. I can talk about that. Not now. In this era of great power rivalry, our support includes fostering a country's capacity to make informed decisions about their choice of development partners so that countries strengthen their self-reliance through partnership, not their servitude to others. Because their long-term success is critical to our own security and prosperity. And we are really also very much focused on the U.S. And the private sector, U.S. corporate and private sector, so that we can bring opportunities to them to the extent that we can engage. We have certain restrictions that we can or cannot do, but to facilitate the field so that they can make their choices, the private sector, and come in. So thank you very much. I, on behalf of Lisa, I can't fill her shoes, but thank you very much for inviting me. She was tied up and could just not get away. I was with her I think last week at the ambassadors meeting, and yeah. So, thank you all very much. I'm happy to try to take a few questions if you'd like. Yeah.
I've heard that USAID, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Teresa Sabonis Health, National War College. I've heard that USAID is working in Central Asia and elsewhere on what is referred to as clear choice, trying to help nations better understand the Belt and Road Initiative and what it means for them. Could you clarify how that works, and what are the tools that you use, and what is sort of underneath that clear choice umbrella?
Yeah, let me respond in the following way. What we are doing in Central Asia, as we are doing all over the world, is to provide information and knowledge to our counterparts and our partners so that they can make the choices in their journey to self-reliance, which is the term that we use at USAID, so that we can end the need for development, essentially. So it's really, it's not a binary question. It is rather a question that provides support and assistance in terms of knowledge and information and systems, so that the countries themselves can decide how best to move forward on their journey to self-reliance.
Any other questions? Yeah, Andy?
Andy Cutchins, Georgetown University. Thanks for joining us today. My question has to do with where higher education, and I think maybe education more broadly, fits into the USAID strategy for Central Asia going forward.
It's always hard for me to talk about going forward because we are dependent on U.S. Congress in terms of the resources that we have available. We have robust programs in education and training and people-to-people engagement. We have had it for a long time. We see education as incredibly important, and I say that in light of what I was mentioning earlier in terms of better information and ability to judge and make decisions in connection with their own journey to self-reliance. We are currently working with the governments and our implementing partners to see how we can better roll out education programs in the region at a bilateral level. And we have different programs than State Department. We tend to take the longer view in terms of our education programs. We both do the same, but we have a very long view in the development of education. So we have supported the universities in Central Asia in the past, and we do this in many locations around the world at the higher education level and at the school level. I was in Kyrgyz Republic recently, and I was shown some of the schools at the kindergarten level and the lower grades and all the work that we're doing there in local languages as well, in the Kyrgyz and Uzbek and others. So we're working at multiple levels because of the importance of education. It's critically, yeah.
I think we have a
understand that.
question over there. Can you take another question?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm Bob Hershey. I'm a consultant. What is being done to try and get some transparency in getting the funding together from the private sector in various efforts and holding meetings online?
Well, I can't answer about online. I don't know. But in terms of transparency, that's one of our pillars across the region, and that would be the case in all of Asia. It's not specific to Central Asia and around the world, really, that transparency is a primary means to be able to make a sound judgment in connection with something and make sure it's fair for all those who are interested in bidding or whatever you want to do, whether with the private sector or otherwise. And we work at multiple levels in order to make sure, or to help to make the processes and systems and procedures transparent so that we have a level playing field for anyone to come in and bid in a fair way to win a contract or something else. And we're regularly doing this. At multiple levels, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Emil Nasreddinov, American University of Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan. Thank you so much. You have highlighted so many successes of USAID in the region. What are the key challenges that you face?
The key challenges? The key challenges. Well, I mean, I would say, I could speak at a very general level. I mean, other than just mentioning the same old, right? Trying to get over matters of corruption and the fairness, and that's what's going to the transparency question. But it's just the human factor. I mean, you know, the trying to come up with ways that we can engage and properly communicate with people so that we understand each other and can move forward in whatever area that we're trying to move forward in. And this takes time, it's difficult, and that's one of the things that USAID brings to the table. We have this really long view. We're not transaction-based. You know, we're not trying to get the spread off of a transaction, right? Or complete the deal irrespective of what's behind that deal or what's underlining that deal. We're really looking at the long, it's the long vision. What do we need to do in order to facilitate, in order to bring greater stability, greater economic growth, call it hope, better educational systems, better health. We have a large, I'm getting off the topic here, but I mean health program in tuberculosis, because it's quite extensive in the region from Tajikistan, the Kyrgyz, Kazakhstan, and all over. So we have a lot of resources in the area of tuberculosis. But the challenges are you know, it's the Soviet legacy and a lot of things. I mean, and I think you're very familiar with a lot of them, but we have to spend time and engage and speak and understand who the counterpart is so that we can, you know, find common ground despite the differences and move forward in a way that brings these stability and to the region. And I think that's what we all want. It's just how do we get there, and we have to work at it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to thank
Could you identify yourself?
Yildiz Nisharapova from American University of Central Asia, Bishkek. I just want to thank USAID for the support of our university previously and now, and especially for the development of academic research. As you know, in our region, nobody gives us money just to develop faculty or motivation or publications, and USAID you are doing, and thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I have a list of it. I'm not going to go through them now. I was given a list of all the accomplishments over the last year that we've in the Kyrgyz Republic. So I really appreciate that. I know my colleagues do. And we're, you know, that's the type of response that, you know, we do 99% of everything we do well, you know, and we work to make it 100%. And so thank you for that. We're very grateful for those comments, and we will continue to engage.
So before we close the conference, I would like to thank Chevron, and Jeremy Regal is sitting here, for their support of the conference. And I want to thank the two people without whom this conference would not have happened. One of them is Jesse Mitchell, who is sitting here. And the other one is Ali Freeman, who I think is still outside. And please join me in thanking our speaker. Thank you very much for coming all the way here and for all the work that you do at USAID in Central Asia. Thank you very much.
Let me just say one thing about Chevron.
Sure.
Because, no, but I mean, we you know, I don't want to single people out as such. I mean, but we've been working very closely with Chevron. And yeah, I know, I saw it on the, but it's true. I mean, I'm not making this up. I have a whole list of examples of our partnership with Chevron, include partnering with the company too, and then I have A, B, C, D, E, F, and you probably know them, so I'm not going to repeat them, but we do a lot of work in multiple countries. I was just there and talked to the Miller, yeah? Is that the, yeah, right. He's moved on, but yeah, I was there, and we speak regularly, so we're moving forward with a lot of private sector engagement, which is the larger point, and we're very thankful to partner with the private sector, and so that's what we do. So thank you all.
Great. Thank you.